The boardroom was filled with tension. In the sleek, glass-walled conference room, the senior executives stared at the woman sitting at the end of the long, polished table. Her hands were clenched in her lap, her heart racing. Every eye in the room was on her, except for his. Michael Dawson, the billionaire CEO, was the one man she hadn't noticed. The one man whose opinion would change everything. But that didn't matter now. The room was alive with judgment, whispers, and the silent accusations of people who saw her not as a person, but as an obstacle to their ambition. Her name was Emma Brooks, a simple woman some would say out of place in a world like this. She had started from nothing, no silver spoon, no privileged background. Just a hard worker with dreams too big for her circumstances. And now, in this very room, she was about to become the target of a decision that could ruin her life forever. "Emma, you're not taking this seriously, Jonathan," the lead executive sneered. His voice dripped with condescension as he leaned forward. "You really think you can handle this project? We need results. You've had how many chances now? Yet here we are, still talking about your failures." Emma felt the heat rise to her. Her face, the humiliation, the shame. Every word from Jonathan felt like a slap, but she refused to back down. She wouldn't let them see how much it stung. "I've been working on this project for months," she said, her voice steady despite the tightness in her throat. "I've poured everything into it." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "And yet, here we are. Your proposal was a mess. You've wasted everyone's time. We can't afford another mistake." The room shifted uncomfortably, the other executives watching in silence, their eyes flicking between Emma and Jonathan. Emma was painfully aware. Of every glance, every judgment, they saw her as weak, as a failure, a woman who didn't belong in this world, but she wasn't about to let them push her down. She straightened her back, lifting her chin. "If you think I'm the problem, then I'd like to see you come up with something better. I'm open to suggestions, but you don't get to tear me apart without offering anything in return." Jonathan's eyes flashed with anger, his nostrils flaring. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. "You think you can challenge me in front of everyone? You're out of your depth, Emma." The air in the room grew thick, heavy with the weight of the confrontation. But before anyone could react, the door to the boardroom swung open with a sharp creak, silencing everyone in the room. All eyes turned to the doorway. In walked Michael Dawson, the billionaire CEO, the man who had built this empire from the ground up. His presence was commanding, his confidence almost tangible. He didn't look at any of the executives as he moved to the head of the table, his gaze settling on Emma. The room went completely still. Emma could barely breathe. She had never met him before, but everyone in the company knew who he was. His reputation alone was enough to make anyone tremble. And yet there he stood, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Michael, I didn't expect you to join us today," Jonathan said, his voice strained, a smile creeping across his face. "We were just discussing Emma's performance. It's been disappointing." Michael didn't acknowledge Jonathan's words. His eyes never left Emma. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice calm, almost too calm. "Has Emma been disappointing?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She felt the weight of his gaze like a spotlight. The tension in the room grew unbearable as Michael's gaze shifted from Jonathan to her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I've tried my best," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. The weight of the room, the judgments, everything crushed her. She had come to this point because she believed in herself. But now, in front of the man who could destroy her career with a single word, she felt smaller than ever. Michael took a step closer, his presence more imposing now. He didn't speak for a long moment, his gaze lingering on her face, as though searching for something. Emma couldn't look away, even if she wanted to. Finally he spoke, his voice low but clear. Then why don't we find out together? Before anyone could react, he turned to Jonathan and the other executives. I want Emma to lead this project from now on. She's the one who has the potential to succeed. And I want you all to back her. A gasp went through the room. Jonathan's face drained of color. Michael, you can't be serious. I said. I want Emma to lead, Michael repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's heart raced. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. A billionaire CEO, someone who could change her life in a heartbeat, had just given her the opportunity she had dreamed of. And it all happened in an instant. But as she looked around at the stunned faces of the executives, a new fear crept into her mind. This wasn't going to be easy. She wasn't just facing her own doubts anymore. She was up against an entire team of people who resented her for being chosen. The target on her back had just grown larger. Michael Dawson had changed everything, with a single decision. But now, the real challenge was just beginning. The days that followed Michael Dawson's unexpected decision were a blur of meetings, whispers, and tension. Emma had hoped that, with the billionaire CEO's endorsement, the executive team would rally behind her. But instead, they grew colder, more distant. They were all too eager to see her fail, to prove that she wasn't capable of handling the pressure. The first few days were chaotic. Emma was immediately thrust into the spotlight, forced to make decisions she wasn't sure she was ready for. Every step she took felt like it was being scrutinized by everyone in the room. She could sense their judgment, feel their eyes on her, waiting for her to make a mistake. But what was worse than their coldness was the overwhelming sense of loneliness she felt. As the lead on this major project, she was supposed to have the support of her team, but instead she had nothing but contempt. They didn't believe in her, and it made her second-guess everything. One morning, as Emma sat at her desk staring at a project report that seemed like an insurmountable mountain, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael Dawson. We need to talk. Meet me in my office at 1 p.m. today. Her heart raced as she read the message. She hadn't seen him since that moment in the boardroom. His presence had loomed over her every day since then, but they had never spoken directly. He was always in the background, watching her, making decisions that would affect her fate. At 1 p.m. sharp, Emma found herself standing outside Michael Dawson's office, her palms sweaty, her heart hammering. In her chest, she hadn't prepared for this. She had no idea what he wanted to talk about, but she knew it couldn't be good. Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly before entering. "Come in," Michael's deep voice called out from inside. Emma stepped into the room, her legs feeling like jelly beneath her. She tried to keep her composure, to look confident, but it was hard. The room was filled with the kind of luxury she had only ever dreamed of. A large mahogany desk, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city. It felt like a different world entirely, one she didn't quite belong to. Michael was sitting at the desk, his dark eyes fixed on the files in front of him. When he looked up at her, his expression was unreadable, like always. "Please have a seat," he gestured to the chair across from him. Emma hesitated for a moment, then sat down, trying not to look nervous. "First of all," Michael began, his voice steady, "I want to acknowledge the pressure you're under. I know it's not easy. You're dealing with people who think they know better than you, who are waiting for you to fail." Emma nodded, grateful for his understanding. It wasn't something she had expected him to say. Most of the time, the executives didn't even care to acknowledge the challenges she faced. "But let me make one thing clear," he continued, his tone sharp. "I didn't choose you because I thought you were the safest option. I chose you because I believe you have something they don't. You have the guts to take risks. You're not afraid to fail, and that's exactly what this company needs right now." His words felt like a lifeline, a flicker of hope in the middle of a storm. She had been questioning everything, her worth, her ability to succeed, but here he was, telling her she had what it took. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, Emma allowed herself to believe in herself again. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." Michael leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "Good. But there's more you need to know. The project you're working on, it's bigger than you think. There are people in this company who would do anything to see you fail. And they're going to come after you hard. They'll try to undermine you, to sabotage everything you've worked for. You need to be prepared for that." Emma's stomach churned. The weight of his words sank in. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing it straight from Michael was a wake-up call. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. "You're not alone in this," he continued, his voice firm. "I'm backing you, but you need to trust yourself and make some hard decisions. The next few weeks will test you in ways you can't even imagine. If you can't handle the pressure, then you don't belong here." Emma swallowed hard, her throat tight. She knew he was right. She had to rise above the fear, the self-doubt, and the judgment. This was her chance, her one shot at proving herself. "I understand," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'll do whatever it takes." Michael's gaze softened for a moment, a flicker of something like approval crossing his face. "Good. Now get out there and show them what you're made of. They're all watching you." As Emma left Michael's office, her mind was racing. The weight of what he had said pressed down on her chest, but she was also filled with a sense of purpose, a fire she hadn't felt before. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for the opportunity of a lifetime. But as the days went by, Emma quickly learned that Michael's words were just the beginning of her struggles. The sabotage started small. An email that had mysteriously gone missing, a report that was altered just before a big meeting, a colleague who seemed to be feeding her false information. Every day felt like a battle, and with each passing moment, she felt the walls closing in around her. The executives were relentless. They whispered behind her back, made snide comments when they thought she wasn't listening. Jonathan, in particular, seemed to take every opportunity to make her feel small, reminding her of her place in this world. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting, Emma found herself alone in the conference room, her hands trembling. As she tried to make sense of the mountain of paperwork in front of her, her mind was foggy with exhaustion, the weight of the pressure threatening to break her. That's when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Michael. "I need you to come to my office. Something's come up." Her heart skipped a beat. What could it be now? She had barely caught her breath after the last confrontation, and now this. But she had no choice. She couldn't back down. Not now. Emma stepped out of the elevator on the top floor of the building, her pulse quickening with every step. Her mind raced, swirling with a mix of dread and anticipation. What had Michael called her here for? The message had been short, urgent, and to the point. "I need you to come to my office. Something's come up." That had been hours ago, and since then the minutes had dragged on as she wondered what new twist awaited her. She had already been through more than she ever thought possible in these last few weeks. The sabotage, the judgment, the relentless pressure, it was starting to take its toll. Emma felt like she was drowning. Each day was a fight to stay afloat, and every step forward felt like one more stumble toward the edge. As she approached Michael's office, the security guard at the desk gave her a nod, as if he knew her by now. Emma returned a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She wasn't in the mood for small talk. She had come to terms with the fact that her life, the one she thought she understood, had taken an unpredictable turn. This was no longer about proving herself. It was about surviving. She reached the door, hesitated for a moment, and then knocked lightly. The voice on the other side was familiar, calm, and reassuring. Come in." Emma opened the door, stepping inside to find Michael sitting behind his desk, his usual confident posture giving off the impression that he never had a moment of doubt. But as she looked closer, she noticed something, an unease behind his sharp eyes, a flicker of something unsettling in his expression. "Emma," he said, his tone still steady, but there was an underlying tension. "Please, sit down." Emma took the chair across from him, her stomach doing somersaults. She tried to steady her breathing, but it was difficult with the anticipation hanging thick in the air. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, trying to sound calm, despite the storm brewing inside her. Michael leaned forward slightly, his fingers drumming on the desk. "I need to be up front with you. There's something you need to know, and it's not going to be easy to hear." Emma's heart dropped. The tone in his voice, serious, urgent, made her nervous. She had known the stakes were high, but hearing it from Michael himself made everything seem even more real. "Go on," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He sighed, his gaze shifting to the window for a moment, as if weighing his words. When he finally spoke again, his words hit Emma like a freight train. "We've uncovered something," Michael said slowly, "something that's been going on right under your nose." Emma's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "There's someone inside the company," he continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "Someone who's been orchestrating the sabotage you've been dealing with. Your emails were tampered with, your reports altered. It wasn't just a string of bad luck, Emma. Someone wanted you to fail." Her breath caught in her throat. She had suspected it, of course, but hearing Michael confirm it was like a punch to the gut. "Who?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Michael hesitated for a moment. "We don't know for sure yet, but the signs point to Jonathan. He's been the one leading the charge against you from the start." Emma felt her world tilt. Jonathan, the lead executive, the one who had been so openly dismissive of her from the beginning. It made sense, but at the same time it didn't. Jonathan had always seemed so untouchable, so secure in his position. She had never suspected him of being the mastermind behind the sabotage. "I don't understand," she murmured. "Why would he do this?" Michael leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "Jonathan has always seen himself as the next in line for the top spot. He didn't think you belonged here, Emma. He thought you were taking up space. That should have been his. When he saw you getting close to me, getting the attention of the board, it became a threat, and he's not one to let that slide." Emma felt a wave of disgust wash over her. She had been so focused on the challenges from the outside, the ones she could see and understand, but this was a betrayal from the very people she had worked alongside, trusted, and thought were on her side. Michael paused before continuing. "I didn't want to tell you this until we had more information, but it's getting to the point where you need to be aware, you need to protect yourself. He's going to come after you even harder now that he knows we're onto him." Emma's mind was spinning. She had never imagined that someone so close to her would turn against her so violently. Jonathan had always been the charming, confident executive. He had a way with words, a way of making people feel at ease, like they were part of something important. But underneath that smooth exterior was a person driven by ambition and ego, willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. "What do we do now?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. Michael's expression softened, and for a moment Emma saw something different in him, something almost protective. "We fight back. I've already started making moves behind the scenes, but you need to be careful. The next few days are going to be crucial. Jonathan will try to push you to your breaking point, to make you doubt everything, but you can't let him. You have to stay focused." Emma nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this fight. She wasn't sure if she was strong enough. But then she remembered why she was here in the first place, the opportunity to prove herself, to rise above the people who wanted to see her fail. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to back down now. "Okay," she said, her voice firmer. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not going to let him win." Michael smiled slightly, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "I knew I chose the right person." As Emma left his office, the weight of the conversation settled heavily on her shoulders. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a new sense of purpose, but with it came the cold, harsh reality of what lay ahead. The battle had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. The days after her meeting with Michael felt like an avalanche, one that Emma couldn't escape, no matter how hard she tried. She woke up each morning with a sense of foreboding, as if the world around her was closing in. The sabotage was no longer a distant possibility, but a constant, looming threat. Jonathan's influence seemed to stretch further than she had imagined. Every step she took, every move she made, felt like a calculated trap set to expose her weaknesses. Despite everything, Emma knew she couldn't back down. The battle wasn't just about her career, it was about her dignity, her ability to stand up for herself and the people who still believed in her. But the weight of it all, the tension in the air, the whispers behind her back, the feeling that everyone was just waiting for her to slip up, was starting to take its toll. She had learned not to trust easily in this environment. The walls around her seemed to close in with every passing day. The only person she could rely on now was Michael, and even he had his own set of rules. He was a man of power, of influence, and while his support had been invaluable, she had to wonder what he stood to gain from all of this. Her thoughts were interrupted by the shrill sound of her phone ringing. She glanced down and saw Michael's name on the screen. "Hello?" she answered, her voice shaky, despite her best efforts to sound calm. "Emma." Michael's voice came through, sharp and direct. "We've hit a roadblock. Jonathan's been making moves behind the scenes. He's managed to sway a few of the board members to his side. They're pushing for your removal." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had known it was coming, but hearing it from Michael in such stark terms made it real. "How many?" she asked, her voice tight. "2," Michael replied. "But that's enough. We're at a critical juncture. If we don't act fast, you'll be out of here before you know it." Emma leaned back against the wall, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had no idea how Jonathan had gained so much power so quickly. What had seemed like a slow-burning sabotage was now a full-fledged war. "Do we have a plan?" she asked, her mind racing. Michael's voice was filled with determination. "We're working on it, but I need you to focus. There's a meeting in the morning. You need to be prepared. If you can't hold your ground now, it's over." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. The pressure was mounting, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, she felt truly vulnerable. The walls were closing in, and every ounce of her strength was being tested, but there was no turning back now. "I'll be ready," she said, though the words felt hollow in her ears. The line went quiet for a moment, and then Michael spoke again, softer this time. "Emma, don't let them see you break. No matter what happens tomorrow, don't show weakness. You've come too far." She hung up the phone, her hands trembling as she stared out the window. The city below seemed so distant, so unreachable. For a fleeting moment, Emma wondered if she had made a mistake by trusting in this world, by putting her faith in people who had only shown her how deep the betrayal could go. But then she remembered why she was here, to prove something to herself, to show that she was worthy of this position and that she wasn't going to let anyone crush her spirit. She wasn't going to let Jonathan or anyone else decide her fate. The following morning, Emma arrived at the office early, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and strategies. She knew what was at stake, but even so, nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. The meeting room was filled with tension from the moment she walked in. The board members sat at the long, polished table, their faces unreadable, as if they were all part of a game where the rules kept shifting. Michael was there, sitting at the head of the table, his sharp eyes scanning the room. But it was Jonathan who caught Emma's attention. He was sitting off to the side, his gaze fixed on her, his expression one of quiet confidence. For a moment, Emma felt the weight of his eyes on her, as if they were piercing through her every defense. He was the one who had started all of this. He was the one who had made her feel like she didn't belong here, and yet here he was, calm, collected, ready to strike again. "Let's begin," Michael's voice cut through the silence. "Emma, you have the floor." Emma stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, the pressure felt almost unbearable. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear but not without its edge. "I stand before you today, not just as a member of this company, but as someone who believes in the work we're doing. The project we're undertaking is more than just a business deal. It's an opportunity to redefine who we are as a company." Paused, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. She had to keep her composure, had to make them see that she wasn't just here because of Michael's endorsement. She was here because she was capable, because she deserved to be here. "As many of you know," she continued, "there have been some challenges along the way. Some of those challenges were expected, but others—" She glanced at Jonathan, her gaze steady. Others were not. The room was silent as she let the words sink in. Jonathan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. The tension was palpable. Emma could feel the weight of their judgment, but she didn't falter. "I'm not here to play games," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm here to do what's best for this company, and I'm not going to let anyone stand in the way of that. Not now, not ever." The room remained still. For a moment, Emma thought she could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Then Michael leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Thank you, Emma," he said. "We'll take that under consideration, but I think it's important that we address some concerns raised by the board." Jonathan finally spoke, his voice smooth and calculated. "I think it's clear that Emma is struggling with the pressure. She's been unable to meet the expectations set for her. Perhaps it's time to reassess her role here." Emma's stomach twisted as he spoke. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, and she knew that this was her moment to either rise or fall, but she wasn't going to let him have the last word. "I've faced worse," she said, her voice unwavering, "and I'm still standing. I've come this far, and I'm not backing down. If you want to see me fail, you're going to have to work harder than that." A murmur rippled through the room. Michael didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, Emma felt like she might just have a fighting chance. The next part will be coming soon.